Happy bye week, Bengals fans, and welcome in to Cincinnati Bengals Talk. I'm James Rapien of allbengals.com. And I told you, I hate to say I told you so, but I love to say it. I told you we weren't taking rest during the bye week. No, we're stacked, packed, and loaded. And today we're going to talk with former Bengals running backs coach Kyle Caskey. He's also coached the Lions. He's coached the Jaguars. And well, he's going to join us for a two-part session. Part one, it's all about Joe Mixon. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and stay tuned for part two. But part one, I ask him about Joe Mixon. I ask him about this offensive line and what they were able to establish in week 9 against the Carolina Panthers. And a dominant performance. Was this Joe Mixon's best game ever? I'm going to ask Kyle Caskey that and so much more. And part two, well, stay tuned for part two because it's dropping later this week, and it has to do with another Joe Burrow. But without further ado, let's dive into our first of two conversations with Kyle Caskey, starting with Joe Mixon. Kyle Caskey is joining us, former Bengals and Lions running backs coach, also coached the Jaguars last season, and he's on Twitter, by the way, at Coach Kyle Caskey. And you need to check out his YouTube. Yes, right here on YouTube, Caskey's Clicker. Kyle, I appreciate the time. As always, man, how are things in your world?
They're going good. I'd much rather be coaching at this point, but I think everybody understands there's two types of coaches, those who've been fired and those who are going to get fired. So I'm kind of living through that right now, and I'm on a very extended bye week, but keeping busy with the Caskey's Clicker stuff down here in Baton Rouge, and the LSU team's making things interesting around here. So it keeps me busy, but I keep up with the Bengals, and I still know a lot of guys on that team, and it's fun to see the success they're having because there's a lot of guys that deserve success on that team, and just kind of keeping busy with all that right now.
LSU North. That's what it's
no
fair
doubt.
to say. Because I found myself I don't know if I was rooting for LSU the other night, but a lot of people in town, not fans of Brian Kelly, he coached for the Bearcats, all of those things. I wasn't rooting against LSU. I'll put it that way. And seeing them go for two was a lot of fun because they got it as well. Let's talk about one of the non-LSU players and start with Joe Mixon, a guy you coached, a guy you obviously scouted during the pre-draft process. Yep. and coached for multiple years here in Cincinnati. Was Sunday the best game of his NFL career when you popped on the film and you watched him again? Or have you seen that before? Because you ask around, I even think Burrow this week went on Colin Cowherd's show and said it's the fastest he's seen Joe Mixon play. What say you? Because you've seen even more of Mixon than Burrow. So was that Mixon's best game?
I think overall it was the best game. I've seen him do that stuff before, but I've seen it in bursts in different games. I've never seen it that type of game from him altogether. And I think I've been saying this before on a few different shows, is that Joe's one of those guys, once he gets in a rhythm and his confidence gets rolling, that's when he's at his best. That's when you see whatever step everybody said he lost, that's where how he finds it. He finds it when he gets that rhythm and that confidence going. And I'll tell you what, if they can keep that going, obviously 5 touchdowns in a game, I think everybody take that every game, but that's not going to happen every game. But if you can get him in a flow that he got, I've seen that before, but I haven't seen it to where it just exploded like it did the other day. And for him to have such a success, not only on the ground, but with the screen game, and then on that scramble throw, that was, not only was that a great throw by Burrow, but the fact that he scrambled back and the scramble rules and everything in the end zone and caught that ball and got his feet in, showed a lot of dynamic ability from him that he still has. And I think, yes, I would say overall best game, but I've seen everything that he did just in different places. So I've never seen it all at once.
Kyle, I look at Mixon, and I don't think anyone is going to question his confidence, right? He's always been a confident guy, and you could kind of tell he's got that aura about him a bit. But do you think that this can get him in a rhythm and kind of set the tone for the second half of the season? Because I was looking back at his numbers in 2019, and it was a tale of two halves of the season. And he ended up putting up huge numbers, but it was in that final stretch, 8 games or so, and they were bad, and expectations weren't what they are now. But do you think that a game like that can kind of set the tone, even though they're on a bye this week, for the final 8 games of the season when the schedule gets tougher and the weather gets cooler?
Yeah, but I think that's when you need to use a guy like that. That's when the run game becomes more important, is when it gets colder, when you get those just miserable games that, and I know they still have some primetime games coming up too. So it's like
Mhm.
some of these night games might be miserable, who knows? But I'm just talking about the weather wise. That's when you can really take advantage of what he's doing. If you go back to 2018, my last season with the Bengals, we were, obviously we got let go after that year, so we weren't great, but he had a year where it was, I think we had 6 games left in the year. And I remember going to him and I said, Joe, I said, you're in the mix right now to lead the AFC in rushing. Let's go. Let's make a goal. Right now, our team's not playing well, but let's make a goal between us that we're going to go out and we're going to lead the AFC in rushing. That was the year they had, I think Zeke and those guys in the NFC were just rolling. So he ended up being 4th in the league overall, but he led the AFC in rushing, and that was a goal he had. And I think when you get something in his head, and right now, I guarantee you, it's the winnings in his head right now too. But you get him in a rhythm, like you're saying, late in the year, I think he can get stronger as he goes, because that's the type of player he is. I mean, if you just look at him, I mean, he's built to be like that. He's built to be one of those guys that's late in the season doing what he's doing.
Kyle Caskey joining us. Make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel, Caskey's Clicker, and which I subscribe to, by the way. As we were doing this, I was like, I can't believe I haven't subscribed. So Cincinnati Bengals Talk, officially a subscriber to
All
Caskey's
right,
Clicker.
I've made it in the
That's
world.
That's right. What did you see from the offensive line when you went back and popped the film on? Because it doesn't take an expert to realize that La'el Collins was on the move, looked better, that they, from a run blocking standpoint, were certainly more aggressive and having more success. Compare and contrast them in week 9 versus what you've seen through the first 8 games, because to me, this was clearly their best run blocking performance, which goes hand in hand with Mixon's burst and all of those things. But it looks like the offensive line made some strides as well.
Yeah, and what they did, they were a lot more consistent. Number one, there wasn't as many of those front side point of attack misses that you've seen that kind of that gets Joe hit early when he gets gets the handoff and boom, he's getting hit. You didn't see those, but then you also go look. There was I believe it was 2nd and 1 from the 9. It might have been in the very first drive, and Joe just runs an inside zone up the middle. It was a tight end crunch block, went over and cut the end to the right, and I mean, they pushed Carolina's defensive line all the way to about the 2. I don't think Joe got hit till he got to the 4 or the 3-yard line. He went almost 6 yards before he even got touched. And you're talking about in the red zone where everything's condensed. And to me, that's where I looked and I said, okay, these guys come to play. And then I believe it was the next play, maybe that Joe scored going to the left, and they pulled Jonah Williams, and he got out in space, did something good. And then if you look at the screen, all the linemen that were supposed to get out got out. The timing was great. I mean, you could just see a rhythm with those guys too. And then don't ever discount the fact that when the run game's working, the O-line gets juiced up. And that's when you start seeing the best of an offensive line, because they want to run the ball. Offensive linemen want to run the ball. They love they'll pass protect for Joe Burrow all day, but if they need to, but they want to run the ball. And I saw a swagger, I think is the word. It was a confidence, not the word. They're all confident, but it's a swagger. It was something different that they just felt it on Sunday.
We'll get back to our conversation with Kyle Caskey in just a second, but I have to tell you about Rivertown Inkery, because Doug Burns and his crew do an awesome job. They made these, the CBT polos that we wear because they're fresh, and put this logo on for us. We're going to get a little more CBT merch. But when you're thinking about quality shirts, whether it's t-shirts, whether it's hoodies with the weather changing, maybe you want a Cincinnati glass, the Tiger Rocks glass that I drink out of all the time it's my go-to for bourbon, right? Is that glass. It's just different in that glass. Well, you can get all of it at rivertowninkery.com. They're about 10 minutes from downtown. So if you're coming into town for one of the Bengals home games this season in December, because they're obviously on a bye, and then, they hit the road for Pittsburgh and Tennessee. Doesn't matter. Come visit Rivertown Inkery. They're open 6 days a week, so don't delay. They're open Tuesday through Sunday. So you want to come in on a Sunday for that Monday night game against the Bills, Rivertown Inkery is where to go, in Oakley on Madison Road, and rivertowninkery.com. Let's get back to our conversation with Kyle Caskey. This offensive line, obviously, there were high expectations coming in. I think this is the first game where it was like, oh, they can be what the Bengals hoped they would be and fans hoped they would be coming into the year. And because I thought Collins and Kappa were just going to be so beneficial and Joe Mixon was going to benefit from having those two guys because of how good they've been and their track record has been run wise. So we'll see if that can carry over. But let me ask you this. In Mixon's career, there's been a lot of offensive line shuffle, and I'm not going to ask you to rip your former players, but I don't recall many games where he wasn't getting touched or forced to behind the line of scrimmage, or forced to jump cut or forced to do things right after he's taken the ball from Andy Dalton or now Joe Burrow or whoever. This was the first time where I think he really got to build up steam consistently through an entire game. And you probably remember other games where that was the case. But if they can do that, even if he did lose a step, he's still going to have huge games, right? And he clearly didn't or hasn't because he showed it on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think too, the offensive line has now shown it. Everybody kept thinking, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? But now that they've shown it, that the other teams are going to the teams they're playing are going to see it as well. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where they're going, okay, these guys finally got it together. Plus, if you look at the sack numbers, they were so high in the early in the year, and they've kind of gone down. So I think what you're seeing is the comfort level of those five guys starting to kind of sink in. The way they're calling the offense, I think, is helping them out a lot too, especially if they could. They're not going to. I can guarantee this. They're not going to run the ball as many times as they ran it against Carolina every game. It's not going to. It's just not going to happen. I mean, it doesn't matter who's calling the plays, but it's going to be one of those things where if you can get them in a little bit of a rhythm, even if you go 50-60% of what they did the other day in a normal game, you're seeing those five guys, the cohesiveness of those guys coming together. And again, I know Frank Pollock's taken a lot of heat this year for the way the O-line's played, but Frank Pollock's got his handful, getting all these new guys in there and getting it flowing. And he's just it's just taking a little time. So again, this hit the bye week, hit a perfect spot. I think they're going to go in with confidence. They'll get their work in this week. They'll go take a break and come back, and I think they'll be ready to roll.
That's part one of our two-part conversation with Kyle Caskey. And part two, well, pretty simple what it's going to come down to. Joe Burrow, we're going to talk a lot about Joe Burrow. We're going to talk about the defense. We're going to talk about what this offense needs to do to be more consistent in the second half of the season. So buckle up. Also, we have Dan Horde coming on Thursday. So we're loaded, right? Whether it's the OT with Elise Jesse, Bengals on the brain, all of our content from the big win over the Panthers, or a two-parter with Kyle Caskey and the voice of the Bengals, the radio voice of the Bengals, Dan Horde, on Thursday, part two of our interview with Kyle Caskey on Friday. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, hit that like button too. We need to get our likes up. And until next time, for Andrew Fox Miller, our channel coordinator, I'm James Rapien signing off right here on CBT, Cincinnati Bengals Talk.